sometimes we have these mental spirals that either send us down a negative spiral or a positive upward spiral. And often things come into our minds, and maybe we see it as a negative thought, and we become discouraged and deflated and demotivated. And if we dwell in that space, we become depressed. Where I've recognized that if people say, okay, it's just a thought, it's not necessarily negative, it's just a thought, what's one positive action that I can take to make things better? And you take one positive action after the next positive action, you start making some progress. We know when you make progress, you start feeling inspired, you start feeling better about yourself, and you start doing that consistently, one positive action after the next. You build up momentum, and eventually you become unstoppable. So the gap is from down at the bottom of that negative spiral where you're depressed to the top of the positive spiral where you're unstoppable. It starts with one positive action. And I think if we can take one positive action in our own lives, we make progress in our own lives. We make the world around us better. And, you think about the 7.5 billion people on the planet, each taking one positive action a day, I think the world would be a better place.
Welcome to the Ideas on Stage podcast, your regular insight into leadership communication.
Hey, John, welcome to the show.
Andrea, thank you for having me. It's a privilege and pleasure to be with you, and excited about our conversation today.
The privilege and pleasure is all mine. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Now, John, today we're going to talk about personal mastery, professional excellence, and the ideas that you have in your great book, which I have here, Liberate Your Greatness. Now, I know that there is a meaningful and a powerful story behind your book and which led you eventually to write the book. Would you like to share your origin story?
Thanks, Andrea. Yes, I'm super passionate about both principles and our themes that run throughout the book around personal mastery and professional excellence. It was Stephen Covey that said that private victories precede public victories. And I firmly believe that, when we win in our personal lives, that spills over into our professional lives. And really the origin of the concept of liberating greatness and hence the book title, Liberate Your Greatness, came from when I defined my purpose almost 20 years ago. I was working in a corporate environment, thriving personally and professionally, fit, healthy, involved in many different things in life, super productive, growing my career. And almost 20 years ago to the day, I lost my father to suicide, and just something that completely rocked my family's world, something we didn't see coming, something nobody expected. There were 2,000 people at his funeral. For perspective, a man loved by his community, served with all his heart, a businessman, a philanthropist, just gave everything he had to give. But I think during that process, he burnt out. He didn't have the strategies that we now know around things like sleep and exercise and nutrition and looking after your spirit and environment and those things to help us thrive personally so that we can continue to thrive professionally. It's that whole idea of, putting your own oxygen mask on first so that you can help everybody else around you. He just didn't have those strategies, and he burnt out. He lost confidence. He lost mindset. He had been on a cocktail of medication for a back operation, and we lost him. It's not something that he did as committing a crime. We lost him. It was a mental health disease, and we lost him to suicide. And 6 months after that, my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. And at the time, cancer was something out there that other people got, not somebody close to home. And I said to the doctor, stage 4 out of, and he said, well, out of 4, it's, terminal, it's 3 months at most. And she fought so bravely, chemo, radiation for what ended up being another 2 years before she passed away. But within 2.5 years, I lost both my dad and my mother to, two really serious diseases. And it just helped me realize that, we've got to take care of what I call our MEPS well-being, mental, emotional, and physical and spiritual well-being. And we have to make common sense, common practice. So sense, an acronym for sleep, exercise, nutrition, spirit, and environment. And that if we don't get those personal aspects right, it doesn't matter what we do in our professional lives, we're not going to thrive. My dad should be out there to this day, still building businesses, teaching people about businesses. He went to the grave with greatness inside of him. My mom was an amazing cook. She should have recipe books out there. She should have, cooking classes out there. But she went to the grave with greatness inside of her. And I decided back then that I wouldn't let anybody go to the grave with greatness inside of them, that I want to liberate greatness. I want to be a catalyst for greatness. I want to inspire, encourage, and uplift people to go to their next level, personally and professionally. And that really is the story of how the concept of liberating greatness came about, turning my pain into purpose, and just recognizing everything happens for a reason. I've had such a wonderful opportunity to impact so many people since that day. And I know that it's not for nothing that it happens. So yeah, that's the origin story of the concepts.
Thank you, John, and thank you for being open to sharing your story, which, having read the book, makes a lot of sense. And also in your book, John, you mention a few other books. So there are references to a few other books and authors. There's one in particular, which is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Just out of curiosity, so I assume you've read the book, but just checking, have you read the book?
Yes, I read the book. Actually, really, also around maybe 25 years ago, even, I think at university, I read the book. And from reading that book and just having that sense of purpose and why we do what we do, that was one of the key books that stimulated a passion, a curiosity in my mind for helping understand why people perform and succeed at higher levels than others. So yes, absolutely love the book. Amazing story and an incredible journey in what was an atrocity, a highly adverse situation for Viktor Frankl.
For me, John, it's the most important book I've read in my life. And sometimes people ask me when I'm being interviewed at podcasts or in other situations, do you have any recommendations for books? And normally they think about like presentation skills books, but I say, like, forget about presentations. Like for me, the most important book is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. So I was glad to see that reference in your book as well. And John, in your book, you go through some core principles, and there are three in particular that are very much connected to the theme of this podcast, which is communication, and also more in particular presenting, public speaking, which are awareness, action, and accountability. So I'd like for you to share your ideas around each of them one at a time. Let's start with awareness. You say that change starts with awareness, and then I'll leave it with you. But the reason why I'm asking the question is because if you think about somebody who wants to improve their presentation skills, for example, then everything starts with awareness. First of all, we need to be aware of our current presentation skills. And then, for example, the second principle, action, then yes, we don't stop at awareness, but we need to start with that, because then the actions we are going to take, if we are aware of some potentially dynamics which are different from the best practices, then our actions are going to be much more useful. Tell us more from your perspective, the principle of awareness.
Thanks, Andrea. Absolutely. So I talk about how all proactive change starts with awareness. So there's so much in the world happening that we cannot control, that is change happening to us, and we can't do anything about that. But if it's change that you want to make happen, all proactive change starts with awareness. You need to know where you are now and where you want to get to, and then you know what the gap is, and you can find a plan to close the gap. So if someone's giving somebody else feedback on their presentation skills, feedback is a gift. Athletes crave feedback. If you think about time, what get better, we say of which actually gift. It helps us get a sense of.
Sorry, John. After you said athletes crave feedback, then I lost you. So would you mind starting again? Then I'll ask our video editor. Wait, so after you said athletes create feedback? If you'd like to start from that. So sorry about that, but this is what's
No, that's
happening
okay.
today.
That's okay. I don't know, something happened there with the network, but great, you can edit it. That's fine. So absolutely, Andrea. So, if you think about awareness, all proactive change starts with awareness, and awareness is often about receiving feedback. Think about an athlete. An athlete craves feedback. An athlete will, run around the track, for example, and come back to the coach and say, what was my time? How do I start better? Is my technique right? What do I need to do differently? Where sometimes in a personal or professional environment, we tend to get a little bit defensive when we receive feedback. And I'm encouraging people to love feedback, because feedback is a gift. So if you think about, awareness of where you are now, that's your current reality. Awareness of where you want to get to, that's your desired future reality. So if someone gives you awareness of your presentation skills, you're not communicating well, you're not sticking to a core concept, have you got a framework that you're working through, it raises your awareness of the gap between where you are now and where you want to get to. And with that awareness, you can find a roadmap. You can find a plan that's going to get you from where you are to where you want to get to. The next stage of the framework is actually alignment. And then it's about alignment with your purpose, your mission, your goals, your values, your objectives. Now, if someone gives feedback to somebody else that their presentation skills aren't good, but they don't have a goal on being a good presenter, well, then it doesn't matter about that awareness, because it's not aligned to their future best self as a strong presenter. But if your future best self is to be a world-class presenter, a world-class online trainer, a world-class influencer, and you have awareness that there's a gap in your presentation skills, now you know what action you need to take. That's learn something, change your mindset, change your skill set, change your tool set. And that gives you an opportunity to level up so that you can become a better public speaker. So I think those three actually form quite a beautiful link, is with great awareness and great alignment, then your action is laser focused. And then what really helps to amplify and accelerate your performance is accountability. So having somebody like myself or yourself, Andrea, where people can come to us and say, this is what I'm going to be doing. This is what I'm committing to doing. This is the journey that I'm going to go on. And we hold them accountable in a positive way. Accountability raises your standards to higher levels of excellence. And again, accountability is one of those words that often when I ask people in an audience who loves accountability, I maybe get a handful of hands, but not everybody loves accountability. What I'm encouraging people to think about is learn to love accountability, because it will raise your standards to higher levels of excellence.
It will raise your standards. It will improve your outcomes as well, like massively.
Yes. Yes.
I've experienced my own life, personal and professional life. And John, you also talk about a very important principle in your book, which is the importance of mastering the fundamentals, sticking to the basics, which again is super relevant in our field. Because, for example, just for you to know, John, a lot of people ask me, for example, what's new in your field? What are the new trends, new tools, new technology? And I think that, of course, on the one hand, we do want to pay attention to what's going on out there, but what really makes a difference and what really separates, say, great communicators from average communicators is whether or not we understand and we master the fundamental principles of communication. Now, I guess that applies in many other areas. It's not just for communication. So from your perspective, tell us more about the importance of mastering the fundamentals.
So good, Andrea. I'm super passionate about that, and I know you are too. There's this wonderful phrase by Bruce Lee that said, "It's fear not the man that has learned how to do 10,000 kicks. Fear the man that has learned to do one kick 10,000 times. That man is lethal, right?" And as a martial artist myself, I've got a black belt in 3 styles of karate.
Really?
I'm passionate about absolutely. Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Oh, yes. From a young age, I started karate when I was 5 years old, and, just went up through the ranks. I got my first junior black belt as a 12-year-old and continued to do it. So just super passionate about the principles, the discipline, the self-control, self-defense, of course, But just the principles of mastery, you don't become a black belt overnight. That takes years of mastering the fundamentals. So when I started karate at 5, there was a group of maybe 10 or 12 of us as friends that all started together. And it's a little bit boring in inverted commas. In the beginning, it's punch, 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 punch. And a lot of my friends didn't feel like they were making any progress, where, I stuck with it. And very quickly, I had one friend drop out after the next friend after the next friend. And eventually, I was the only one out of our group of, 10 or 12 people that started that continued to progress. And then when you get to black belt and you're throwing 6 punches a second, that's exciting. But that doesn't happen overnight. It's years of mastering the fundamentals to be able to achieve what you want to achieve. You've got to do the reps. A lovely quote that I saw recently by Usain Bolt, who said that he trained 4 years to run 9 seconds. And it's the same thing. You don't just show up to an Olympic event and run 9 seconds. It was at least 4 years for him of training every single day, perfecting his craft to be able to run the 9 seconds and break world records. So we've got to condition ourselves daily for mental, emotional, physical, spiritual well-being. We've got to condition ourselves to master our craft. And when it comes to communication, same story. Are we telling the stories the way they resonate with our audience? Let's get some feedback. What might we do to improve that storytelling? How can we improve our technique? How do we get our setup looking right, our tech working correctly? And, just constantly mastering those key skills will really, really help when it comes to communication.
Yeah, and I think the key insight there, John, is that on the one hand, the importance of doing the reps, practicing, but also focusing on the fundamentals.
Yes.
For example, Jeff Bezos famously said, focus on the things that don't change. He says he's often asked, what do you think is going to change in the next 10 years? And he says, nobody ever asked me, what do you think is not going to change in the next 10 years? And he thinks that the second question is much more useful, because if you focus on the things that don't change, you will be successful in the future.
Absolutely.
And I think we can apply that in many different contexts. Now, talking about mastering and doing the reps and practicing, there is a wonderful concept that you talk about. You shared a LinkedIn post a few weeks ago on that. You talk about the idea of becoming 1% better every day. And I think, John, some people, maybe many people, I don't know, not everybody realize how powerful it can be to become just 1% better every day. It could be at public speaking, it could be at whatever skill you want to master. Would you like to share your ideas around the importance of the fact that even minor tweaks often lead to major impact?
That's it. And thank you for quoting the book as well. The minor tweaks lead to major impact. Andrea, yeah, just so passionate about that too. We underestimate what can be achieved in a year, and sometimes we overestimate what can be achieved in a day. I think a lot of people potentially set themselves up to fail, where they think that they can get through too much in a day. And that, you get to the end of the day and you realize, I didn't get to all those things. And it maybe gets you a little bit demotivated. So you stop taking action. Where if you recognize, actually, all I need is 1% consistently every day for the next year, and you'll be 27 times more, 27 times better by the end of the year. That's the way the compound effect works. And a lot of great people have spoken about that, the likes of Darren Hardy in his book, Compound Effect, James Clear in Atomic Habits. Zappos used that as a philosophy in their business on just encouraging people 1% better. What are those minor tweaks that you're constantly measuring and monitoring and improving that allow you to become better? It was the Sky cycling team that won the Tour de France for a number of years in a row, led by Sir Dave Brailsford, who also spoke about marginal gains and all those tiny little things that you can do to make improvements that make you better. So again, from a communication point of view, from a business point of view, from any skill that you want to master point of view, getting that feedback to say, okay, what have we learned? And, what can we improve? How do we make small tweaks that make major impact, minor tweaks that make major impact? It's a wonderful philosophy. And I think it also takes a lot of pressure off people to recognize, just make those small improvements every day. Think about the converse of that as well. if you don't make those small improvements, do you stagnate or do you go backwards? Because if somebody else is making those improvements, they're progressing. And if you're stagnating, you're actually going backwards. And worse, if you do go backwards, the gap gets further and further apart of where you could have been and where you actually are right now. So, I always think that now is the best time to do a reset if people need to do a reset, and then just think about 1% better every day. You'll be so amazed with what you can achieve in 90 days, in 180 days, in 365 days. So just to think about those 3, 6 month and 12-month goals.
Love it. And this is very much connected to mindset, which you also talk about in the book. You go through some mindsets that if we want to achieve personal mastery, professional excellence, we need to consider. There's one in particular, John, which resonate with me, which is the beginner's mindset. And again, the reason why I'd like for you to share your ideas around that mindset is because what happens with us, for example, at Ideas on Stage, I don't know if it happens with you as well, John, with your clients, but sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes we have people who are interested in working with us because they want to become more confident presenters, they want to improve their public speaking skills, whatever they want to achieve. And that's what they tell us. But then in the conversation, we realize that secretly they think they know it all. And that's there's a bit of a disconnection there between what you say you need and you want and what you actually think. And I think that having a beginner's mindset, being open to change, if you say you want to make whatever change you want to make, being humble also is crucial. Yes. So from your perspective, tell us more. Beginner's mindset.
A few things that you mentioned there, Andrea, that really resonated, that humility to learn and grow is something internal, right? That's as much mindset as it is about your heart attitude, to have that humility to learn, to grow, to say, whatever the situation, doesn't matter what I've learned in the past, can I learn something different here? How can I see somebody else's perspective? The reality is we might both be seeing the same event from two different perspectives, both true and valid, that we could teach each other something. We could learn something from that experience if we're open to receiving and not just saying, well, my perspective is right, it is what it is. And I do see that. I see a lot of people that are closed, young people, older people, doesn't matter, but they could be closed to new ideas and they don't learn anything and they miss out on the opportunity. And then I see some people that are just so hungry for knowledge, they're like sponges, and they get into an environment and they say, we're here to learn, we're here to grow. They don't know what it is that they're going to experience today, but they're receptive. And I think that makes the world of difference. When you go in with a beginner's mindset, it means that you recognize you do have a frame of reference. You recognize you do have a knowledge base, but you're starting as a beginner with that hunger, with that desire to learn and grow, fresh perspectives. You're going to be more curious, and curiosity is the starting point for all learning. You ask questions because you're curious, then you learn something, then you can apply it, then you can teach it, then you can coach it, and then you can role model it. The 6 different levels of mastery when it comes to learning. It all starts with curiosity. To be able to be curious, you have to have the beginner's mindset that says, I'm here as a beginner, ready to learn and grow.
And the beginner's mindset, that curiosity, John, that's what I've seen with you when we both attended the business accelerator with Dent that we've attended some time ago. And that's what prompted me to ask you, John, because we are, for our listeners, we are part of the same accountability group. And I wanted to be part of your group because I saw that in the accelerator, even if you've had your successes, you've won multiple awards, amazing clients, you always approached each session with that open-mindedness. I don't know if that's correct in English, but you were open-minded, and I could see your curiosity, your enthusiasm, and that was contagious for me in a very positive way. So thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. Thank you for that. I appreciate you validating it. Yeah, I think, just to have the humility to be in an environment with other people that are succeeding at different levels, and not having a sense of comparison, but just saying somebody's doing something differently and it's working for them. What can I learn from them? How can I make, little improvements to what I'm doing to take something from each person's book and be able to apply that, each person's story or their journey and apply that. And I think just being immersed in that environment was so helpful for both you and I, as is the accountability. I look forward to those sessions, where we can just share what are some wins, what are you doing differently, what's working, what's not working, because it gives us an opportunity to get inputs. And if we get to the top and we've got there alone, we've done it wrong, right? I think it's business is a journey and it's a team sport. I talk in the book about the power of collaboration, that when we communicate, collaborate, and co-create the future, we'll be better for having collaborated. We'll be better for having learned from each other. And I have to have that sort of humility if I believe in excellence. Excellence is the gradual result of always striving to be better. And that means if today my way is the best way, and you say, hey, John, there's an insight that'll be better, let's do it this way. I'll say, absolutely, let's do it that way, because that's excellence. It's continual improvement. It's not a destination, it's a journey. So having that passion for excellence, that quest for excellence, I think, just embracing that principle really helped me to get the most out of the DENT program together. And I continue to learn and grow from our time together, Andreas. I appreciate you and all the, inspiring, mutually beneficial conversations that we have.
Thank you. And as part of our journey, as a reminder, we have a call on Friday. As I told you, I do have a couple of questions to ask you in particular around guarantees, but that's a separate topic.
Sure.
And now, in your book, you also talk about courage. And again, a principle which is so relevant to the theme of this podcast. You say that courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting in spite of fear. You also say that we should choose courage over comfort. And I like that because, for example, a lot of people think in my space, a lot of people think that they want to be more, that they think that they want to be more comfortable when presenting. However, I think that comfort should not be the goal, because, for example, presenting by nature is not a comfortable thing to do. Presenting is not a natural thing to do. Even what we're doing now, like recording this podcast, is not a comfortable thing to do. If we think about public speaking in general, there's always a level of either anxiety, nerves. So it's not about overcoming those feelings, because I'm a presentation coach and I feel nervous before any presentation. Yes. So my goal is not to overcome those feelings. Of course, there are things we can do to control them in a much more effective way, but we will never overcome those feelings. So it's much more important, I agree with you, to take action anyway, in spite of the discomfort sometimes. In your space, tell us more. What are your thoughts around the fact that courage is not the absence of fear?
Yes, courage is not the absence of fear. It's acting in spite of fear. And I think a lot of that is recognizing the fear to begin with, and then taking action in spite of the fear. So it's not to say, oh, there is no fear, there is no fear. We have to acknowledge the fear and almost understand, what fear am I experiencing? So typically the three fears that people experience, it's the fear of loss, the fear of the process, or the fear of the outcome. So what if I speak up? What if I stand on stage? What if I do a presentation and I lose something, like I lose credibility, or I lose friends because my opinion isn't a popular opinion, or I lose something in the process? What if it's a painful process? So I have to prepare, I have to practice, I've got to get somebody to listen to it, I've got to edit the speech, I've got to create slides. And because it's a painful process in our minds, we stop and we don't take action. Or what if it's a painful outcome, or we fear the outcome? Worst case scenario, I finish and it's just like crickets. Nobody's clapping, nobody's laughing, nobody's doing anything. Or worse, they are laughing, but not because of my jokes. They're laughing at me. So we fear that worst case outcome, where I try to encourage my clients to think about, well, how do you reframe that to gain? What do you have to gain even if it's a failure in inverted commas, but you learn something and you're failing forward, that's a gain. It's making you better. It's opening up your eyes. It's showing where you've got some gaps. Or if it's a success, you gain confidence, you gain experience, it expands your capacity. So to think about what we have to gain instead of lose, to think about how we can make it a fun, inspiring, engaging process rather than a painful process. And then to think about, well, what's best case scenario? Best case scenario is that my stories resonate, that I impact people because I'm here to serve. It's not about me. When I stand on stage, I always think, who am I serving today? Thank you for the opportunity to serve today, to liberate greatness. That's my purpose, is that I exist to serve by liberating greatness. The serve comes first. It just changes my perspective on why am I here today? Not for me. Yes, I might be in the spotlight, but it's not because I must stay in the spotlight. I need to tell stories that resonate. I need to equip people with strategies, with tools, with frameworks. And the same as with the book, my heart is to do exactly that. So I think when we do that, we step out of our comfort zone, and magic happens outside of the comfort zone. Nothing big is ever achieved by staying comfortable. What I love about your story as well, Andrea, about the fact that you're still nervous before getting onto stage. What I didn't hear you say is you're anxious. Anxiety will come when you're not prepared, when you haven't done the work, and now you have to step up on stage. That will be anxiety. But the nerves are a good thing. And I think it's Simon Sinek who talks about, when you're nervous, your hands get a little bit sweaty, your heart rate increases, your mouth gets a bit dry. When you're excited, your hands get a bit sweaty, your heart rate increases, your mouth gets a bit dry. So to remind yourself, when you're nervous, you're excited because you're about to get onto stage and impact people positively. I think it's a great place to be.
Yeah, and thank you also for sharing your approach and your view on failure. There are there's a football. I'm a football fan, John, and there is a football coach in Italy. I follow the Serie A, the Italian league, and but there are other coaches who said the same thing. And he said we never fail. He even said we never lose. We either win or we learn. And I think that's a fantastic approach. And also, you talk about the distinction between progress and perfection, which again is useful here to mention, because in our space, too many people want the perfect outcome, the perfect presentation, for example, whereas there is no such thing as a perfect presentation. A colleague of mine, Phil Wakenall, always says, aim for personal, make it personal, not perfect. There is no such thing as a perfect presentation. And I think that imperfection is also can be a good thing. Of course, it depends on what we are talking about, but the aim should not be perfection. The aim should be progress, which might be connected to becoming 1% better every day, for example. Any other thoughts around progress over perfection?
Yes, I think perfection holds us back from actually taking action. So if you think about getting the perfect presentation together, you're not going to present it until you feel it's perfect, which means you don't make any progress. Nobody hears your message. You don't impact anybody. There's no progress for you. There's no progress for them. Nobody benefits from anybody striving for perfection. It's why I believe that excellence is a better thing to strive for, because of that gradual improvement. And it's a case of, well, I'm going to go out there. I'm going to do my best. I'm going to serve at my highest levels. And I will get feedback. I'll be humble enough to receive feedback and actually say, how was it? What could I do better next time? What worked well? What resonated? What would be even better if I did something else? And that helps us make progress, and we get to impact people in that journey. The reality, I think, as well, when it comes to presentation and communication, Andrea, is that people don't necessarily know what you were going to present. So how will they know what was perfect or not? Did you resonate? Did you connect? Did you deliver a message? That's what people want to feel. So yeah, I'm a firm believer in progress over perfection, and not letting perfection hold us back from taking action.
One, we were talking about our journey with Dent, and I've learned a lot. I've been working with them since 2018 with different programs, and one piece of advice I got from Daniel Priestley years ago was Okay, I'll give you I'll tell you the story, and then I'll tell you what the piece of advice was. So
Sure.
he suggested that I created a brochure that I could use during or with a team during sales conversations with prospects, with potential clients. So a brochure with the benefits and features of your program. And after a few weeks, or maybe even months, I don't remember now, of tweaking and trying to make it perfect, then I said, we have a private community Facebook group. I said, very happy, my brochure is 99% done. And I was very happy with myself. And he responded with a comment saying, that was like 5 years ago. I still remember. He said, 99% done is not done. And I loved it because, again, for me, I wanted to make it perfect. And as you said, I didn't make progress because he was right. He wasn't done. If you have a brochure or anything, a presentation, which is 99% done, it's not done. So
Yes.
good is better than perfect.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and done is better than perfect. Done is better than perfect, right? And I think it's so powerful. I've got a client who, we were doing some work together, and the feedback just kept coming on small little improvements. And I'm, as you know, I'm passionate about the small improvements. At a point, I said, look, we've got to get this out. It's more important that it gets out there and it can start to positively impact the people we've designed this program for. And he realized, actually 100%, let's get it out there. And the feedback's been amazing, which is really, really good. So absolutely, done is better than perfect. You think about Apple. Apple's a great example of exactly that. They've just released iPhone 15. It's the 15th iteration of what was supposed to be the best smartphone in the world when it was released. What was it? Over is it almost 20? No, not quite 20 years ago. 15 years ago, I guess. Maybe 15 years ago. That should give us a clue. The iPhone 15. So even there, Apple, with all of their tech, have the humility to say, we've made it better. We've learned. We've heard from you. We've taken in feedback. We've improved this, we've improved that, and it gets better inside and outside because they're on a journey. And just because it was the first iPhone doesn't mean it was the best iPhone. The 15th is the best at the moment, and there'll be more iterations moving forward.
And the same is true with our brochure, for example. Since then,
yes.
So once we got it out there, we must have changed it many, not just 15 times, maybe 15,000 times. So
yes.
Once you get to the habit of just getting it out there, done is better than much better than perfect, then it's a game changer. Also, a great one of the reasons why I like your work, your approach, is that on the one hand, we are talking about excellence. On the other, in your book, you say, and I have it here, you say, go hard on the plan and easy on yourself. In that section of the book, you were talking about nutrition. And so you were saying, like, for example, from a nutrition perspective, aim to get it 80% right, which is connected, I guess, to what we talked about so far. And that's something I like about your work. So go hard on the plan, but at the same time, easy on yourself. Tell me more.
Yes, so that really came out of a fitness program I was doing for clients, online fitness training. And what I found was, we had a really solid plan, a nutrition plan, an exercise plan, and we would encourage people to stick to the plan. And if you stick to the plan, you're going to go from where you are to where you want to be, and you're going to get great results. But I often found that when people stumbled, that they'd really beat themselves up about that. And they would get, I've messed up the plan and I didn't stick to it and it's a whole disaster. And I'd encourage them, go hard on the plan and go easy on yourself. Give yourself a bit of grace. We all have stress. We all have moments, even from a nutrition point of view. I'm thinking, myself, where, I feel like a bit of chocolate right now. And it's not on the nutrition plan I'm trying to stick to, but if that's what I feel like right now, that's what I need right now. So that's what I have. And hence the 80% rule, 80-20 rule. Get it 80% right, and you're going to make the right sort of progress.
Hi there. Before we continue with this episode, I just wanted to take a moment to share with you some resources that I believe would be super useful for you. The first one is my book, Confident Presenter. Check it out. You can find it on Amazon. I'm going to include the link in the show notes. It's a book for business owners, leaders, and the teams who want to become more credible, confident, and convincing presenters. To make the most of the book, take the Confident Presenter Scorecard, which is an online tool that allows you to assess your current presentation skills in less than 3 minutes for free. You just need to answer a few questions. The scorecard will give you a score from 0 to 100%. It will tell you what that score means for you, and it will also identify opportunities for improvement. And then the last thing is my web class. I often run free presentation skills web classes where I go through my own process for creating my own presentations and those of our clients. So if you're interested, I'd love to see you there. I'm going to include all the links in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening to a podcast. It means the world to me. Now, let's jump back into the conversation.
I think just to give ourselves some grace, we're not going to get it right all the time. And that links into the desire to move away from perfection. If we're aiming for perfection, we will fail. Guaranteed, we will fail. But if we're aiming for progress, if we're aiming to go as hard as we possibly can on the plan and go easy on ourselves, that's going to serve us better mentally, emotionally, and physically than if we try to get it 100% right 100% of the time.
By the way, the 80-20 rule or principle seems to work everywhere in life. Whatever you want to do, 80-20 is always a good indication.
Yes.
And yeah, at the beginning of this conversation, you mentioned a book, so I'd like to go back there because I read it. I don't remember now the author. Was it the Power of Habit or something like that? What was the book?
Atomic Habits. So that's,
Atomic Habits,
James
which
Clear.
I've read. Yeah. So sorry, tell me again the author.
James Clear.
James Clear. Yeah. So I read it last year, maybe. Great book. And now it's not just for habits, but and you also talk about in your book about routines, the importance of routines of course, in your own field, in your context. But just out of curiosity, and John, the answer doesn't have to be yes. If it's no, it's no, it's okay. So this is just my curiosity. I know that you speak in public a lot, conferences, you told me that. So we are recording this in November 2023. In a few weeks, you're going to the Bahamas to run a program. So you are used to be on stage. And before you speak in public, do you have any particular routines, anything that you do to make sure that you are in the right mindset, or anything in particular that you do before you speak in public?
Yes, I have many different routines. Are you thinking immediately? So as I'm about to step onto stage, that sort of routine, or the build up towards an event?
Yes. So I was thinking about just immediately before, but if you do in a different context, in a different time frame, that's okay too.
Perfect. So yeah, just thinking about the past a couple months, Andrea, I had the privilege of speaking in Spain, in Nashville, in San Diego at 3 different events, back in the UK, and most recently in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. So getting to travel across the world to speak. The key thing that I do always is think about my audience. In my planning and my preparation, I have to think about the audience. All of those different events, different audiences, similar message, obviously using my framework, but making sure that I resonate with my audience. So really putting my focus on them. So always in my longer term preparation, and then immediately as I'm about to step onto stage, I'm thinking about who am I serving today? What do I want them to take away today? So I've got to keep that top of mind. I'm here to serve. I'm here to give. I'm not here to hold anything back. I don't need to receive anything other than knowing that people are receptive and they're learning. So that's part of my mindset that I go into it. Obviously, the planning and preparation is critical. So running through key themes, not having everything written down, verbatim, word for word, but having key themes that I want to communicate. And then I do, breathing exercises before I speak. Whenever I speak on a podcast, whenever I speak on stage, I do about 13 minutes of breathing first, and I run through a routine to do that. That just helps me get, good breathing in. It warms up my voice, recognizing that my voice is my instrument, and I want to play it beautifully. I want to resonate with people. I want to inspire, encourage, and uplift people with my voice. So my voice is a key thing. And generating energy is important too. So I like to exercise. You've picked up in the book. That's a key theme in my messaging around our personal ecosystem. So just generating energy before I get onto stage. Sometimes it's literally just standing in a place and bouncing, just reminding myself what I'm about to do, because people feel your energy when you get onto a stage. And if your energy is flat, the audience will be flat. That's not the audience's fault. That's my fault if I'm doing that, right? And similarly, if the audience walks away thinking, I'm buzzed, I'm energized, I don't know what happened there, that's because I generated energy to give to the audience, and I helped them generate energy during the session. So a few things there, just to recap, that I'll do as I go onto stage: the breathing, the focus on the audience, generating energy, running through some key messages, and then just getting up onto the stage and serving with all my heart.
Great. John, so what I like to do, I like to just summarize a few of the things you mentioned for the benefit of our audience. I like to amplify them because they are all super useful for listeners. So first of all, you said that you always think about the audience in preparation for the presentation, just before the presentation. And this is the number one principle in communication. Mm-hmm. You can have a great message, which may be simple for the audience to understand, clear for them to follow and remember, engaging as well. But if it's not relevant to them and their needs and the context, then it's not going to help. So start at Ideas on Stage. We always say, John, when you give a presentation, it's not your presentation. It's always the audience's presentation. So I agree with you 100%. Then I also do breathing and voice exercises. I have a 1-minute routine, if you want, which includes these two things: voice warm-up and breathing. For me, breathing means something super simple. I breathe in through my nose and I count to 4, and I breathe out through my mouth and I count to 6. Because when you make your breathing out longer than when you breathe in, that helps you calm down. You also want to learn how to breathe with your belly, not with your chest, but don't get into the specifics. Voice, yes, voice, you said, is a powerful tool. Voice is perhaps the most powerful tool we have for obvious reasons, when communicating, especially when we are communicating online. Sometimes online, if we are not on video, voice is the only tool we have, so it's important to warm me up. Can I mention something around energy, which may be, and I know what you meant, and I think it's correct. However, I think we also need to distinguish, and I'm just doing this because we're having we are recording a podcast, but I like to keep it informal. We're having a chat. And I think that some people think that they have to be energetic. They need to generate energy when presenting. And if we really think about it, so on the one hand, I totally understand what you're saying, and for you, it makes a lot of sense. But I don't think that anybody needs to generate energy. It's not. I don't think, John, that it's true that everybody in the audience likes energy. There are, in my experience, there are some people in the audience who love energy, like the Tony Robbins type of energy, for example, when presenting, and others don't. But what everybody likes, what I found, is that everybody likes dynamism. We all love dynamic speakers, and we can become more dynamic by changing the way we use our voice, for example, or by changing the way we use our body when we are on stage. It could be in person, it could be online. So for me, it's important to differentiate between energy, which may or may not work. It depends on the context, and it could work for you. That's great. But then dynamism will work for everybody.
Yes. And I love your perspective on that, Andrea, recognizing that each person's different, that you and I will always be the second best anybody else, right? We'll be the best ourselves, but we'll be the second best anybody else. So we have to generate the energy or the dynamism that resonates with who we are and how we serve. And it's not necessarily about being frenetic on stage and hyping people up, because just too much at one level is not attractive. but how do you take people on an emotional or energetic roller coaster where they're feeling different things throughout the experience? And I think that's more of what I'd like to experience, and what I'd like to give is that sense of people are feeling something. They're being moved by the message. They're being moved by the delivery. And that needs to come from me starting that, generating that in myself first, focusing on the audience. I love the fact that that's your number one principle with communication. It's about the audience. It's the audience's presentation. I love that. Great insight. And just being dynamic. You and I can speak passionately without being loud, without speaking too quickly, and people will be moved by that level of communication, or we can generate energy in other ways. So I love the perspective, and good to recognize that. Yeah.
And now, as you know, my book is around becoming a more confident presenter. The title is Confident Presenter. And so every time I find interesting perspectives on confidence in general, I'm always interested. So in your book, you talk about the confidence competence loop.
Yes.
Tell us more.
Yeah, so a very famous framework in psychology. It's an infinity loop that talks about confidence and competence, and recognizes that if you're competent at a particular thing, you know how to do the thing, you will be confident. So competence, confidence. And what I love about the fact that it's an infinity loop, it doesn't only have to start with competence. It can start with confidence. Confidence to give it a go. Confidence to try. Confidence that you've done the work, you've done the research, you've learned about your audience. Confidence that you have prepared. And then when you have that level of confidence in your ability to give it a bash and to learn and to fail forward and, figure things out along the way, then you do take action. And that's where the courage comes in. With clarity and confidence, you demonstrate more courage. And then because you do the thing, you become more competent, which makes you more confident. And that's the infinity loop in its beautiful flow. So people don't have to wait until they have the skills to actually have the confidence to go and do the thing.
In your book, you talk about starting before you are ready.
Yes.
Which is this, like, if we want to start, so we don't have to start with competence. We can start with confidence. To do that, often we need to be willing to start before we are ready, right?
Yes, absolutely. You think about the first time you stepped up on stage, Andrea, and you delivered a presentation versus where you are now as a highly skilled, highly confident presenter. If you knew where you would get to and you waited until you had the skills at your current level to do that first presentation, you may never have started, and the world would not be as good a place as it is because of you today. So yeah, it's just such a good message. Start before you're ready, with the humility to learn, to grow, the confidence to figure things out, and you will make progress.
And I think the two things are very much connected, because if we start before we are ready, or if we accept this, but at the same time, we fall back to the position of, we need to make it perfect, there's always a contradiction there, and it's not going to work. But if we embrace both principles, start before you're ready, and it doesn't have to be perfect, it will never be perfect, then they work really well together.
Yeah, really good. I mean, you mentioned your brochure and how many iterations you've had on that. And I've seen that in you to, you ask for input, you ask for perspective, and, you've been doing this for some time. So the fact that you're still asking for input shows your humility and your desire to learn and grow and continue to improve it. So starting before you're ready is, the brochure was 99% done. Get it out there, start. Okay. And you weren't necessarily ready. It didn't need to be perfect. And because of that, you've got feedback, you've made it better. It's had a few iterations. It's at a higher level because you started, because you got it out there. And it's a great principle in anything that we're doing. If you ask my kids, and I'll often do this, I'll remind them, they'll get stuck on something, and I'll say to them, well, how do you master any skill? And they'll just smile and they'll say to me, study and practice. And that's what it is, right? Learn the skills, learn the strategies, learn the techniques, and then put them into practice. You have to practice. You got to take the action. Otherwise, you don't master the skill.
If I think about public speaking in particular, so thinking about what your kids tell you, and they are so right, public speaking is a skill. And by the way, John, it may be the same in your space as well with any other skill, but I'm just thinking about public speaking now. It's a skill that requires knowledge and technique. It's a bit like learning how to play a new sport or how to play a new musical instrument. You need knowledge, you need you need to know the rules of the game, for example, in a sport, and you need technique as well. And anytime we have this combination of knowledge and technique, your kids are right. What really makes a difference is practice. And okay, so as we approach the conclusion of our conversation, I'm just curious, John, in your work, so you help your clients achieve personal mastery, professional excellence. I know that you work one-to-one, you work with teams as well for them to collaborate better. In your experience, what's the role of communication? What does communication in your communication skills play for us as individuals and as teams to be able to achieve excellence?
Communication is critical, Andrea. You know, in our personal lives, if we want to be able to deliver our message, to be the best version of ourselves, and to give the gift that we have, you know, you'll see in my book where I talk about, I want to liberate your greatness, not just for yourself to have greatness, but because your greatness is your gift that you get to give to the world. Means we have to be able to communicate that with full authenticity, with full vulnerability, with full confidence. We've got to be able to communicate that if we want to make a positive impact in the world. So communication is critical in our personal lives and for us to be able to master communication. When it comes to teams, I often look for how teams perform, and I have a lot of clients that will come to me as high achieving teams, but not high performing teams. They'll achieve high results, but those results are coming at the cost of relationships. They're coming at the cost of their own well-being or the team's well-being. They're dysfunctional. And the thing that I look out for most is how do they communicate with each other? Dysfunctional teams don't communicate. They don't collaborate, and therefore they can't co-create the future. And those 3 C's is what I look for in a high-performance team, and how I help my clients move from high achieving to high performance is I help them become a high performance team that's highly energized, highly engaged. They drive growth together with empathy and clarity. And here's the key is that they communicate, collaborate, and co-create the future. If you're communicating well, you will collaborate because you'll embrace each other's perspectives. You'll embrace what I call cognitive diversity of thought, the fact that you and I are going to see different things. That's good. Andrea, help me see what you see because I don't see it. I want to see your perspective. When we do that, when we communicate that openly, we'll collaborate and we will co-create something so special that we will become a high-performance team and achieve amazing things. So I'm always looking for those things and helping clients get to that point of high performance through communication, collaboration, and co-creation.
I'd like to close a conversation by talking about, in the same way as you close your book, you close with the 1 positive action challenge. So again, for those who haven't read the book, which I recommend, what's the 1 positive action challenge?
Thanks, Andrea. I appreciate you mentioning that. You know, sometimes we have these mental spirals that either send us down a negative spiral or a positive upward spiral. And often things come into our minds and, you know, maybe we see it as a negative thought and we become discouraged and deflated and demotivated. And if we dwell in that space, we become depressed. Where I've recognized that if people say, okay, it's just a thought, it's not necessarily negative, it's just a thought. What's 1 positive action that I can take to make things better? And you take 1 positive action after the next positive action, you start making some progress. We know when you make progress, you start feeling inspired, you start feeling better about yourself, and you start doing that consistently, 1 positive action after the next, you build up momentum and eventually you become unstoppable. So the gap is from down at the bottom of that negative spiral where you're depressed to the top of the positive spiral where you're unstoppable. It starts with 1 positive action. And I think if we can take 1 positive action in our own lives, we make progress in our own lives, we make the world around us better. And, you know, you think about the 7.5 billion people on the planet, each taking 1 positive action a day, I think the world would be a better place.
And that's a lot of positive actions. Yeah, love them.
Yeah.
Let's wrap up with a couple of things. One is, so in addition to your book, which again I recommend, it's here for those who are watching this, Liberate Your Greatness by John. Is it Rousseau? Is that how you pronounce your surname?
That's right. It's Rousseau.
It
I
sounds
have.
French, or
It does sound French. It is French indeed. My great grandfather was born in Paris, so both sets of grandparents Greek Cypriots. So the Greek would have been Roussos with an S at the end, but because my great grandfather was born in Paris, they changed it to a silent T to make it sound French. So,
okay,
South African born Greek boy with a French surname.
international. And
Yeah.
right, so beyond your own book, if you think about what we talked about today, personal excellence, professional mastery. Did I get it right? No, personal mastery, professional excellence. Sorry.
That's right.
Yeah. Are there any other books? It could be just one book or a few other books that you recommend for our listeners?
Andrea, thanks. It depends what your listeners are wanting to achieve. You know, as you mentioned, Viktor Frankl's book is so powerful, Man's Search for Meaning, because it really gets to the heart of why you're doing what you're doing. Simon Sinek, who spoke about Start With Why, also popularized that concept of, there we go, of the why, how, and what, being clear on why you do what you do. And I'm a firm believer in that. And then really just the skills that you're wanting to acquire. You know, your book, The Confident Presenter, is so powerful. It's got so many great frameworks. I love the way you simplify things and you help equip your readers with the right strategies and tools and frameworks to tell stories and to move through that and become more confident as presenters. I think from a storytelling point of view, Mark LaRue's book on Glow in the Dark is also really powerful. You and I both appreciate Mark and the work that he's doing in the world. And I know you've interviewed authors that have written books on how to present, like, do TED Talks. So there are a number of different books. My recommendation always is the application of the principles. So if somebody is reading Confident Presenter, master the principles in Confident Presenter. I know how much work you put into that and the research that you did. It's your 20 plus years of experience that you've put into one book. So I'd encourage people to go deep rather than going too thin across a number of different books. And it's the same with my book as well. You know, if we apply the principles consistently, it's that, you don't have to do 10,000 things, do 5 things 10,000 times. That's going to be powerful.
Yeah. And by the way, so for our listeners, I interviewed Mark LaRue on this podcast twice. And the last time a few months ago, where we talked about Glow in the Dark, his book, which is all around the power of sharing your personal stories to grow your business, but not necessarily to make a bigger impact, whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. And now that your book is out, so it's been a few weeks now, and the answer again could be no, but if you could go back and change something in the book, would you do it? Would you change anything? And if so, what would you change?
Interesting question, Andrea. I think when I was writing the book in the beginning, I found myself trying to get too many things too right, and I had to remind myself of the principle of progress over perfection. And if I was to go back with that written up on my wall somewhere in big letters from the beginning, I think I may have had the stories flowing easier and just being a little bit less constrained in the beginning. With the I went through various iterations. I'm sure you did with your book. I found with the iterations, I loosened up a little bit more than I was in the beginning. And, I feel like all of that experience in writing the first book means that I need to write a second book so that I can put all of those lessons into practice. So it'll just be that, to have the confidence to tell the story the way it truly authentically is. And I've done that now in the book, but just thinking about that first iteration, not to try and get it to the point where it's, overly cooked, but just well prepared, well thought through, messages that resonate and principles that people can apply.
Yeah. And by the way, I don't know about you, but I do have an idea for a second book for me. And maybe we'll talk about it in our accountability calls.
Amazing.
Do you already have something in mind for potentially a second book?
I do. I've got one that's already in an ebook format that can definitely be fleshed out. And there's a potential third book that's I've got a title for. I've registered the title, the URLs, and it's got an outline. So I need to.
Can you share the title, or is it top secret for now?
Well, so the sense framework that I shared with you previously, I've registered make common sense common practice. So just recognizing that a lot of those elements of sleep, exercise, nutrition, spirit, environment, we know we need to get good sleep. We know we need to exercise. We know we need to eat well. We need to take care of our spirit, whether that's faith or our values. And we know we need to have a good environment, but people don't always make common sense, common practice. So I want to equip people with the strategies and the tools and frameworks to do that. And there's another one called Onto the Water, which is about stepping out of the boat with faith, taking massive action. And that's really linked to the courage conversation that we had earlier, recognizing that there will be fears, there will be, wind and waves that will discourage us from taking action. But I've learned in my life that that's how we achieve incredible things with faith, with massive action, stepping out of our comfort zone onto the water.
I'm looking forward to book number 2 and 3, and you will be back if you want.
Thank you, Andrea. I
you
would
will
love
be invited
to.
for sure.
Thank you, Andrea.
On our podcast. And if anybody wants to connect with you, where should they go? Where do they find you?
Thank you, Andrea. So John Roussot is my LinkedIn profile. So they can find me on LinkedIn, they can find me on Instagram, they can go to johnroussot.com. And if they want some more information about the book and some additional bonuses for the book, liberateyourgreatness.com is the book's landing page as well.
And we're going to include everything in the show notes. And let's close this way, John. We talked about many things, and maybe you mentioned that already, which is fine. I think repetition is good in communication. Let's say that somebody watches this conversation, they listen to it, and after a while they forget everything, because that's how our brain works. But let's say that they remember one thing, just one thing. And if they remember that thing, you will be happy. What's that thing? What's the most important thing you would like our listeners today to take away from this conversation?
Thank you, Andrea. I would want your listeners to recognize that greatness is within you. There's greatness within each and every person listening here today. And if they have the desire, if they have the will to recognize where they are now and where they want to get to, that's the starting point of the framework. It all proactive change starts with awareness. Whatever it takes to liberate their greatness, I would be super excited that your listeners take it away with them today.
Thank you very much, John. All the very best.
Thank you, Andrea. It's been such a pleasure being with you. Thank you for hosting me on your podcast. And I look forward to our future conversations and indeed our journey together in our accountability and our friendship. So I appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Likewise, I appreciate you, your work, you taking the time today, and we'll speak on Friday.
Amazing. Thanks, Andrea.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Ideas on Stage podcast, there are many more you might like. So please subscribe, leave us a review, and tell us what you think. You can find many more ideas on business communication at ideasonstage.com or by searching for Ideas on Stage on iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and goodbye for now.